Welcome to the Anxious to Secure podcast. I'm Yula, your anxious attachment style coach, CEO of The Marriage Coach. I'll help you to finally stop overthinking marriage or relationships by overcoming your fear of being left by a partner. Thought by thought, action by action, and now episode by episode. Why? So you can experience true, authentic, anxiety-free love and feel a lasting ripple effect in all areas of your life. Are you ready to become the best version of yourself? Hey you! Welcome to the first episode of the Anxious to Secure podcast. I'm Yula and I'm so grateful you're here. I'm super excited. Let's get cozy, comfy, or take me on your walk to work or the park. Now, I'm going to guess that you're probably a very sensitive soul, somebody who feels everything very deeply. You're emotional, you're very empathetic, and maybe even a bit of a hopeless romantic. Well, that has been me for like my entire life. I feel everything very deeply, and I felt like the clients I've been coaching have been very similar, just like me. Maybe you're also very hypersensitive soul, and things that are happening around you, you feel even more than other people. Does that sound familiar? If yes, this podcast is very helpful for you, especially if you are in a relationship, if you're in a long-term relationship, even if you're married. And I think this podcast can be very helpful if you're even single, even though I don't really work with singles much in my coaching programs. I'm more specialized in helping people who are in long-term committed relationships because personally, that's where I have the most experience, and this is how I created the biggest impact. Because I feel like the more we're getting triggered through our partners, through our romantic relationships, the better we can heal those triggered parts. Although I just need to say you can definitely heal also parts of yourself through friendships, through family members, and start the healing journey on your own. But the podcast can be helpful either way. So you're the type of person who probably falls hard and deep. When you love with your whole heart, and that is so beautiful. And I want to really highlight that anxious attachment is not something that is just dark and negative. I always feel so sad when people hear they're anxious attached and they start spiraling. They feel ashamed. They don't want to hear it. They want to hide it. And I just want to share my side of the story, that when I heard I was anxious attached, that I felt so empowered because I realized, hey, okay, this is not who I am, even though it's easy to just put a label on you because it helps you to understand yourself better, your patterns, your core beliefs, your upbringing. And then because it groups like certain patterns of your behaviors together, you can then create like a path towards your healing journey. And even I don't like the word healing because healing sounds like, oh, there's something wrong with you. You're sick. You have got this diagnosis. And I think that's kind of not the most helpful point of view in my eyes. It's very helpful if you think about it like as a transformational journey rather than a healing journey. And for me, it's really you're upgrading towards your highest self, towards the best version of yourself. And there's definitely nothing wrong with you. And there are so many beautiful parts about being anxious attached, like the side that you are so empathetic that you can really feel so many emotions. And that might be sometimes for you as a struggle because you often take on other people's emotions and you struggle setting boundaries and taking things personally. But there's also so many beautiful sides about it. And I think I'm going to touch on the subject more in other episodes, what it means to being like very hypersensitive, setting boundaries and all of that stuff, because that helped me in the past a lot. Also how to manage your emotions around that. But today I just want to introduce you a little bit about the podcast, who this podcast is for, and explain you a little bit about who I am, about my journey, and then we can start with the proper first episode. So are you ready? So maybe you found yourself, in relationships with emotional unavailable partners. One of the core problems that anxious attachers have find themselves in. And even if you think, okay, I'm going to leave my partner, I'm going to find someone who's perfect, who's secure, who gives me what I need, who reassures me, that's not the solution, because our subconscious mind will always attract the emotional experience from our childhood. That's why often if we don't work on ourselves and we then leave the relationship and find someone else, we actually invited more problems because we created more baggage through our relationship, and now we have a bigger baggage. Maybe you've even dated someone who's distant and avoidant, and even physically avoidant as well. Maybe someone in long-term relationships, maybe even someone who's married. That's happened to some of my clients. Maybe someone who's just a workaholic. Maybe someone who's married to his job. Someone who prioritizes his dog. I think that's a very common pattern for avoidant attachers, because they're really scared of intimacy, of opening up, of trusting others. So they get attached to their dog because they also need love and they also need connection, but they really feel unsafe trusting other people, so they get their love through to animals. And I have so much empathy for that, because I can see their hurt and their pain and their trauma they've been through. And I also started to getting very attached to animals I think only over the last few years, more and more, but that's another story. So, and no matter how much reassurance your partner might give you, you're probably in a very healthy relationship, but it doesn't seem to be enough, because you have this void inside you. I always had this void inside me of needing so much love, so much security, but no one ever was able to fulfill that for me, because it was so big. And no matter if you receive breadcrumbs from your partner, no matter if your partner even reassures you enough, it will never be enough. So you might maybe then read into his texts, overanalyze their words, and when they pull away, it feels like the end of the world. And I totally get it. I have been there. That's been me like for 30 years, only until I was about 32, I think. So a few years ago, I started to change this pattern, because I realized that is a pattern of mine. And yeah, and I can break the pattern myself. So you're the person who dreams of deep, meaningful connections. You crave those late night talks, emotional intimacy. You're not someone who just likes I don't know, the surface level chats at a party. That's never been me. I always like the deeper connections with people. And I only felt like I want to find someone who really truly matters. Um, I want to feel like I truly matter, and I want to find someone who really matters to me as well. Someone who cares about me. But somehow maybe you also keep finding yourself feeling really anxious in your relationship and have relationship anxiety. You're worried and doubting if you're not good enough for your partner. Maybe even if your partner's not good enough for you, it's kind of, if you have relationship anxiety, it kind of goes both ways. And if that sounds like you, I just want to let you know you're 100% not alone. There's so many people who feel like this, but a lot of times we're not speaking up really. It's not normal to speak about relationship doubts and insecurities, because that's something very vulnerable. We often just see the perfect picture on social media. And sometimes we're even afraid of opening up with your friends and family about it. Like, I know when I was with my partner, I was kind of not sharing much about these worries with my friends or with my family, because I was scared that they would just tell me, oh, just break up. It doesn't seem right. And I knew that it wasn't really something I wanted to do, and I was kind of felt a little bit ashamed about it. What if they would say, oh, I'm in a toxic relationship? What then? And also, I felt bad talking bad about my partner. That was also another thing. So let me share a little bit about my story before we jump into the first episode. So a little bit about me. So I'm German. I'm from Germany, and I think was it I lived now 9.5 years in London. I only moved to Sicily last year, in spring. So I used to live with my partner in London for, nearly 9.5 years. And our honeymoon phase was absolutely amazing. I think that was nearly like 4 years ago, and everything was literally perfect. I felt this huge magnetic energy between us. It was so, so strong. By the way, hint, hint, I didn't know at that time that this was more like my survival instincts kicking in rather than being, how you call it, being in love. But I didn't know that. It just felt so good being around him, and I was really, really so attracted to him, which didn't happen first because we were flatmates. And at first there was absolutely nothing. He was not my type at all. There was even a question in my head like, do I fancy him? Do I like him? Nothing like that. And only months later until we started talking every day and there was a friendship between us, as all of a sudden, I don't know, feelings started to develop, and then I got suddenly very, very attached to him. But I want to go into that another time because that's a whole nother story. So, and I also want to share a story later on, not today, but in a different episode about, is it love or is it just attachment? Because I feel like this can also create so much relational anxiety. And then also the question, does it mean I have to break up with my partner now if I was just attached to him because of my anxious attachment style? Or what's going on? And if you want to hear about anything like this, jump over to my Instagram handle. I'm gonna link it into my bio sections of the podcast. And you can also find it my Instagram at the marriage coach, and you spell it with the dot marriage dot coach. And you can DM me. You can also leave any comments under any post or reel saying, hey, please share this on your podcast, and I will make episode about it. Okay, guys, I don't know if you can hear this, but here is like 5:45 when I'm recording this. And every evening, every morning, they're like all the dogs in the street are like suddenly like screaming and yowling and howling, and they're wanting their food. It's crazy. I absolutely love this little area where my partner and I live. We have our flat. It's super quiet, but this is the only thing that is super loud. So I hope you can't hear it in the background. But yeah, that's just the little background noise I have going on right now. But back to the story. So after our honeymoon phase, all the emotions starting to change. We started having conflicts that seemed to come out of nowhere. And we both started to show up as a more authentic version of ourselves. The show-off phase started to fade away a little bit more. And we just triggered each other left, right, and center. I can't say it any other way. And we were like, I don't know, something was not right anymore. Like our communication was so off. I thought like we were speaking a different language. And yes, he was Italian and is still Italian, and I'm German, and we were both speaking English, but we were not speaking the same language. He was saying something, I heard something completely different, then he like took it the wrong way in a different way, and I felt like I was saying A, he understood B, but I meant C. I don't know. I just didn't know what was going on anymore. And that left me felt spiraling for days and doubting everything. Yeah, that was hard. That was tough. And turns out he had an avoidant attachment style, and it clashed really hard with my anxious attachment style. Of course, who would have thought? But of course, at that time, I didn't know anything about attachment styles. And every time he needed space and he withdrew into his room, I was immediately triggered. And the thing was, at that time, we still had two different rooms. So we had a flat share, that's where we met, with two different rooms. We were both on the first floor, basically next to each other. But when he felt triggered and we were in his room, he kicked me out of his room. hello? That made me so upset whenever he did that. And that really pissed me off and made me feel like he's abandoning me literally. And when he kicked me out, and at that time I didn't realize that, he needs space a lot of times, but only when he felt triggered. He also wanted to be with me a lot, but sometimes it was just the opposite, and he suddenly it was all too much for him. It was literally like an invisible punch in the gut suddenly, and I didn't feel enough, and I was so desperate, for a hug, for validation, for reassurance, for him to just see me, what I wanted, what I needed, to just tell me like, it's gonna be okay, I'm sorry, and I love you, and to not always like kick me out whenever he felt triggered. I just wanted consistency. I just didn't want it to be good on one day and then suddenly everything changes. But the more I kind of became closer to him and I wanted more love and reassurance, the more he kind of kept pulling away, I felt. And there was moments when we fought, really, conflict is something very triggering for me and is still nowadays, but I feel like now I've done so much inner healing work, changed my beliefs around it. I've healed my abandonment wounds that conflict doesn't mean death anymore. Like literally at that time, because I was so unconscious about everything. I wasn't aware that like a conflict subconsciously meant for me, oh my God, this means there's something wrong with us. This means maybe he's going to leave me. Maybe I'm going to end up alone. Maybe I'm going to be abandoned. And that means maybe I feel like, not going to be good enough. There's so many patterns around that, so many thoughts that happening on a different level, on a very, very hidden level, which I didn't realize. So the more you really can think about, hey, what am I making this mean when I feel so triggered, is a very powerful way to peel back the layers in the onion. So my mind was racing every time with millions of doubts, and everything was crazy at the time. So I felt very insecure and incredibly worried that he would leave me. And when he would say something like, maybe we shouldn't be together, my God, that was like the stab in the back, I think. That literally destroyed me. And that happened a few times during our relationship. And that made me actually believe like, oh my God, I'm in a toxic relationship. If someone is like, threatening me to break up with me, this means toxic. I've kind of put a label on it. I was like, oh my God, I can't tell anyone about it. If I would tell them, they would tell me right away to break it off, to not being treated this way. And that was terrible. So I felt very stuck and hopeless. And at some point I realized, you know what, maybe it doesn't make sense. But the moment we actually talked about and sat down, it's like, okay, maybe it doesn't make sense. I was so heartbroken. And then that moment when my partner realized as well, okay, maybe this shouldn't work or this can't work, then he also then came closer to me again and pulled me back in. So it's a very normal cycle that once you kind of talk about, okay, maybe this doesn't work, that your partner then changes his mind again. It's a very crazy cycle. I realized breaking up with him didn't feel right, but staying together also didn't really nothing felt really right. So I was very torn and scared to open up to anyone. I was scared to lose him and scared to admit that maybe I was even part of the problem. But then everything kind of started changing, and I stumbled upon a quote that changed everything. I can't remember the exact words, but it was something like this, and this is how I would now remember the quote and made it kind of my own. And it starts like this: your thoughts are not let me start again. Your thoughts are not reality, but they shape it. And it makes so much sense because there's not just one reality. It's like, let's say your partner says something, and what you're making it mean is something completely different than your partner making it mean, than what your partner is making this mean. This is really important to know because your partner could say, are you sure you want to wear that dress? And your partner is just asking this because maybe it's cold outside and that was his intention. but you are maybe making it mean, oh my God, he thinks I'm not pretty enough in this dress. I'm too fat in this dress. I don't know. You could make it mean so many different things. And that's why this quote of your thoughts are not reality, but they shape it is so important, especially for anyone who's anxious attached. And then it continues with your thoughts create your emotions create your actions, and then your actions create your results. And this is really a quote I'm going into detail in literally every episode, because this is the foundation of my coaching. This is based on CBT therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, and it's very, very powerful. And that's when I realized I didn't have to feel anxious and doubtful and insecure. My thoughts were fueling those emotions. And if I could change my thoughts, maybe I could change how I felt. And then maybe I could show up differently for myself and my relationship and so on. So I decided to challenge my anxious thoughts. And instead of assuming the worst, every time my partner would pull away, I could, start thinking of myself like differently. I could ask myself different questions. Like, what if this isn't about me, What if he pulls away and this has nothing to do with me right now? What if just needs space to recharge? Is that possible? And I addressed the situation with curiosity instead of jumping to conclusions, instead of judgment, instead of being angry right away. And with that, I really began to find solutions instead of staying stuck in this cycle of self-pity and wallowing. And that's when I started to feel very empowered. And that didn't even take months. That actually was in the first week of hearing the quote and realizing, hey, what if I reframe my thoughts and see how I feel? And I can just recommend anyone, just try it out today. With when your partner says something, just see like what other thoughts are there? What else could be possible? And that's when I was also discovering attachment theory, and suddenly everything made sense. It was like someone turned on the lights. I started to understand why my partner felt so triggered, why we were miscommunicating constantly, and most importantly, I realized I could change my behavior as well. And here's the thing. When I started to change my reactions, he changed his too. And I'm not going to promise this is going to happen for every single relationship out there, because of course I don't know yours and I don't know if you're in an overall healthy relationship, but it happened to so many of my clients, and it's so possible for you too. So now, I would love to just say we lived happily ever after, like blah, 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 blah. But of course, all our problems were not magically gone. It still took more work, and we still haven't arrived yet somewhere, because healing is always an ongoing journey, and we're still having fights and arguments, and that's so normal. But there's I don't know, it's such a huge change to compared to where we have been like 3 years ago, 2 years ago. And of course, there's still challenges, and we still trigger each other sometimes, but it's on a completely different level now. And we know how to communicate better. We've gotten so much better at navigating, the ups and the downs, and yeah, just being a team also. And no, my partner hasn't changed his attachment style, in case you're wondering. He's still avoidant and attached. And I think that's very important to highlight, because a lot of people think, your partner has to do the work as well. And the work you can always define it differently. And for me, my partner didn't have to do the work of attachment theory. He didn't have to become securely attached. But by me communicating what I needed, what is important, by me showing up in a more calm way and not criticizing him, and showing up in a better way, he showed up better too. And as long as you can educate for your needs and express your parts, and he's then respectful of that, and he's trying his best. Even though it doesn't necessarily mean he's going to have these deep emotional talks with you. He still has his challenges, but as long as the needle is moving towards, I think that's a really good sign. So, and honestly, I really wish I was taught these tools in school. It would have saved so much heartache and so many sleepless nights, and I spent overthinking tasks and wondering if you're too much for someone to handle and all of these things. Yeah, and that's why I really created this Anxious to Secure podcast. I wanted to share these tools with you so you can stop feeling stuck in a loop of anxiety and start really creating the secure connection and relationships you deserve. We all deserve. And in this podcast, I'll be walking you through everything I've learned: attachment theory, emotional mastery, the Gottman hacks, and simply mindset shifts that will transform your relationship with yourself first and then also with your partner. And at the end of each episode, I will always share with you actionable steps you can take away so you can actually do the work and not just consume the podcast, because actions create results, as I mentioned from the quote. And yes, you don't have any excuses anymore and you can actually become secure. Again, this was just the intro podcast, so today I don't have a huge action step. I just want to share with you. I really highly recommend checking out if you are 100% like anxiously attached, or if you're perhaps more disorganized attached or even avoidant attached. I have a free attachment style quiz. It's like a 3-minute digital quiz that you can find online. And if you head over to my Instagram page, which you can find under @themarriagecoach, you write it out as like the.marriage.coach, and you can reply and comment under any of my posts or reels the word quiz in capital letters, and you get an automatic message sent to you with a link. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I cannot wait to go on this journey with you. I'm so excited. Please have a little bit patience with me. This was just my first episode, and I feel like podcasting is really a skill. It will take me a while to get a grip onto it, to be able to express myself in a way that is really, I think, resonating with everyone. So I really appreciate if you would give me some feedback on my Instagram. I catch you next time. Thank you so much. Bye bye. Yours, Yula. Thank you so much for being with me here today. Remember, change in your relationship starts with you. Thought by thought and action by action. If you love this episode and want to give me a virtual high five, please give me a 5-star rating wherever you're listening from. It really helps me to boost the podcast a little bit higher in the rankings so I can help even more people just like you. And I'll see you in the next episode. Bye bye.